What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the garage, and today we're going to take a look at the Northstar engine, and we'll do a little bit of work, and by a little bit of work, I mean we're going to clean it up, so stick around. Hey everybody, welcome back to the garage as usual, and I want to thank all the new subscribers out there as we're just growing by gangbusters. I appreciate everybody that enjoys the content, shares the content, likes the content. Remember, you've got a couple ways that you can share it. The easiest way is by using the address tuning101.com. Takes you right to the Goat Rope Garage homepage on YouTube, or you can go through goatropegarage.com. And then, of course, we are on the Instagram, which is, I believe it's just Goat Rope Garage. But if you are on Instagram and you are doing projects that involve stuff that would be interesting to other members, make sure and use the hashtag Goat Rope Garage. Pretty simple, right? Everything's about the garage. Everything's about sharing knowledge, information, projects, all that fun stuff. So today we are diving into the Northstar engine. We're going to take a look at. We're going to try and clean it up because this thing doesn't look like it's been cleaned for a while. In fact, there's a lot of leaking that's been going along the cam sensors and things like that. But we'll talk about the cam sensors a little bit, and you know, just have a little laid back beer drinking episode where we just kind of have some fun. So let's jump into it, see what's going on underneath the hood. So, as you can see, I have got the cover off. This is a giant engine. In fact, it is longer, wider, and taller than an LS platform. So, that's going to be the nice thing about going in here, doing the LS swap eventually. And I have double checked, and the cradle is the same. So the engine mount locations are the same. Should be pretty straightforward as far as that goes. We have the new ECM in, but I do not have the connectors yet. That's going to be coming up here soon. But as you can see, it's pretty dirty under here. Doesn't look like it's really ever been cleaned up. And then down around the cams, it is very dirty where there's some oil, just oil seepage. And that's not surprising. I mean, I'm guessing that this thing has not really been cleaned up since it was new. And so that being said, there's not a lot of oil seepage, but everything for the most part looks really good. So we're just going to kind of hose everything down with some goat milk. You know, use some proprietary blend goat's milk over here. We're going to drink a beer, maybe two, let everything soak in, and then we'll rinse it off, see if we can get most of this cleaned up. If not, we can come back and hit it with some engine cleaner after the fact. But what we're looking at in here is a pretty standard setup where we've got an intake manifold, fuel rails, the dual overhead cams where it gets a little bit interesting, and the heads are really cool because the actual place where the manifold intake runners meet the heads is flat, and that's where the supercharger is going to sit. In the back of it, the starter is actually in the V between the heads. Pain in the ass if you ever have to replace a starter on one of these. But almost everything else, as I said, should line up pretty good for the supercharger, which we have sitting on the shelf over there. The question is going to be whether or not the idler pulley mount and the tensioner for the supercharger mount is in the right place, because the superchargers for the Northstar actually uses a different power steering pump that has an additional pulley. So you've got the pulley for the power steering pump that's driven by the crank, then you have an additional pulley on the power steering pump down there that comes up and then ties into the supercharger crank, our supercharger pulley snout right here, and then the intake from the supercharger pulls from the back. And so we'll have to figure out a way to route the intake ducting, but should not be an issue. On top of it, this being the stock hood, we'll have to pull the hood blanket down, cut a hole in it to make room for the supercharger, because eventually we'll probably sculpt a cowl onto it to make it all work out. But that being said, let's dive in, let's spray this thing down, drink some beer, see how well it cleans up. Okay, now that I've hit it with a liberal coating of goat's milk, aka soapy water, I'm going to let it kind of sit for a couple minutes. In the process of sitting, I'm going to drag out the power washer, throw some RV cleaner in it, and get it ready to go, and then we're going to clean this thing out. Now you got to be aware, don't try and shoot water directly into electrical connections. You can cause some issues, but that being said, you can still hose out the underside of the engine bay. Just let it dry thoroughly, and there is the chance that if this thing's not been maintained properly, we might have some issues, but we're going to try and be aware of where all the connectors are, clean everything else off for the most part, and then if we have to, we can go out, pull it out, use electrical contact cleaner on any issues that we might pop up after the fact, and use a bunch of dielectric grease. So whenever you are doing electrical connections underneath the hood, if you are replacing a sensor, things like that, it is always worth going the extra mile, adding dielectric grease to it to keep out the elements, things like that, because that way if you have to clean up your engine bay later on, you're not going to have as many issues. So let me get that sorted away, and then we'll start hosing this thing down with the power washer. And I've got a nice drain over here in the middle of the garage, so I can do all of this in the middle of the winter without having to open up any doors or anything. So. Okay, things are looking significantly better already, specifically around the areas where we had a lot of oil buildup. So I'm going to hit it with a little bit more of the goat's milk, kind of clean this up, let it do this a couple times, try and get down into some of these spots where I didn't hit the first time, get the remainder of the grease out. But as I said, looking tons better already. Make sure whenever you mix up your own batch of goat's milk that you use something that has a lot of grease cleaning power, cuts oil, things like that. I like Dawn Platinum myself, the Ultra style, and don't be afraid of putting too much in there. This is kind of one of those situations where there's probably no such thing as too much. Now, if it gets so thick that you can't spray it through a spray bottle, yeah, it's too thick, but we're trying to cut some of the nastiest caked on grease that's been on there for 10 plus years. So we're going to go pretty heavy, hot and heavy with it. Give it a good shake up, get it mixed in real well, and then lay it on very generously. This is a prime example, as there's no such thing as too much goat's milk. All the goat's milk. Spray it everywhere. And try, the nice thing is you can reuse one of your wife's spray bottles that has cleaner in it. Rinse it out a couple times. Get one that has both spray and stream mode on there to make your life easier, so you can hit those deep nooks and crannies without having to get dirty. I mean, I'm wearing clean clothes right now, and I'm planning on watching football games later without having to take a shower. So we're going to try and keep this a clean process. Just because you're making dirty stuff clean doesn't mean that you have to get dirty in the process. So, okay, let this soak for another minute or two, then we'll just hose it off with the power washer. So, looking a lot better. If you look in a lot of the spots down here by the cams, sensors, these are the cam sensors here. These are the cam actuators. Unlike the push rod style motors that use oil pressure, these use magnetic sensors to adjust the cam timing. Generally these cams are going to be the same situation where they are parked at full advance, and then they're using the actuators to retard cam timing on there. But I mean, all of this was just completely covered in grease. We now have it nice and cleaned up. It's not, factory clean, but it is 99% better. The whole thing's 99% better. We're going to let this thing sit overnight, let everything completely dry out. We don't want to try and start this thing while it is this wet underneath the engine bay. But for the most part, as I said, we've got some areas on the intake manifold that just has some grime that's not going to come off. That plastic or composite that makes that up kind of absorbs that stuff. Might be the same thing on the head covers, since they use composite head covers instead of aluminum. That's just something that we're going to have to live with. But for the most part, as I said, everything is significantly cleaner. We can get in here, finish it off. We'll clean the cover after this eventually and probably paint it, or not, who knows. The cover may never go back on this car just because we are going to be putting the supercharger on eventually. So, but that's basically it. This is the Northstar. This is the bastard stepchild of the GM platform. This is what the Blackhawk's going to be based on. Basically, it's going to be a smaller version of this with 2 turbos on it. So good luck tuning that. Maybe somebody will actually support that like they didn't support this platform. And hopefully in the next couple days we get the connectors in so we can start doing the ECM swap, because that's where it's going to get very, very interesting. And on top of it, if you guys, we hooked the Tech 2 up to this, not the actual Tech 2, we hooked the VX Diag up and used it in Tech 2 mode yesterday to play with a lot of the different features on there. If you guys be interested to see more about that, let me know down in the comments below. So that's it. Not the most enthralling thing, but it is part of the process. And I told you guys that I would document every single step that we take on this car. So I thought to myself, I'm going to clean the engine. I might as well do a video on cleaning the engine. Now, a lot of you are probably going to throw shade my way for using a power washer on the engine. Generally, you're not going to have any, especially if you let it just kind of air dry itself out and everything comes back to normal. All these connectors from the factory have electronic grease. Blah, I can't talk tonight, but they have the grease in there. So look for some stuff, like we've got some repairs that we probably need to do on some looms in here where it's just time has taken its toll. We'll get around to doing some of that. You've heard me talk about using hockey stick wrap in the past. It's the cheap variation of this cloth tape that they use to wrap a lot of these looms up. We'll replace some of this plastic loom possibly. We're having fun with this. We're going to learn on this for a little bit. We're going to do the ECM swap. We're going to end up supercharging it. If supercharging it doesn't get us our goals, then we are going to throw nitrous on top of the supercharger on this setup. You know, we're going to eventually do a meth injection on it. There's a lot that's going to be coming down the pipe. So that all being said, if you want to follow this process as closely as possible, we are using the pg4car.com address, the one that we originally set up for the Project Gen 4 car fundraiser. We're using that address. It's going to link you to a Google Drive where any documentation that I do on this car will be available for you to check out. I'll post a link down below into the description. So right now I have the pinouts for the ECM swap that I've gone through and marked. That's available right now. Then once we get into doing tuning and stuff like that, any electronics that we install on it, if there's installation guides, all that stuff will be available on pg4car.com, and you can literally follow step by step through everything that we do. And I know a lot of you are probably saying, well, this is a Northstar, this isn't a platform that I'm going to work on. We're still going to be installing an E67, which is the advanced version of the E38 ECM, which covers almost every Gen 4 platform. Silverado, Corvette, Camaro, you name it. All of those platforms are covered from the ECM standpoint. So we will still be doing tuning, map tuning, speed density tuning, timing tuning, boost tuning, all that stuff. We're going to be doing it on a Gen 4 platform, so don't get hung up. We might touch on a couple things that are specific to things with dual overhead cams, so you 4-cylinder guys might be able to pick some information up, because we are going to mess with the VVT stuff on here, because there is a lot of benefit to VVT on the dual overhead cam setup, unlike the standard pushrod V8 setup, where VVT is basically there to maybe try and get you a little bit more cylinder pressure, a little bit better gas mileage. On this, the power is made through VVT, so we're going to have to address that. We're going to have to play with that. We're going to have to see what we can do with it. So that being said, if you have not subscribed already, make sure and click that subscribe button down there. If you have not checked out the Patreon, check it out. You can get to it through goatropegarage.com. It's a great way to get tuning assistance for $15 a month. Super cheap. And we also do drawings, things like that, exclusive to Patreon members. If you find any of this information useful, throw that thumbs up. If you want to share these videos with somebody else, once again, tuning101.com. I'm super excited. Everything's kind of coming together. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff here in the next few weeks. I've got to do some suspension maintenance basically on this. So I will break down doing control arm, bushing replacements. So this is not exclusive to the XLR. This covers Corvettes from like 1997 until current. So the whole process is the same. This is just a C6 Corvette whenever it comes to the suspension side. So we will be doing the bushings. I got the bushings on the way. We'll be talking about that process, how to go through, make everything shore up a little bit because we're a little bit loose right now. But other than that, the big thing that we're going to do next is the ECM swap. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Hopefully everybody had a good Thanksgiving. If you have any questions, hit up the comments down below. ABT, always be tuning.